1. So I work in fast food at a place that rhymes with tonic. At my store, we are usually understaffed, and it's mostly because the higher-ups want us to make more money for the company than it takes to pay the staff. So they will have less people on the schedule than we need, and expect us to take on the extra pressure. It's messed up, I know. We will often have only 2 or 3 people in the kitchen, and only 3 or 4 people working up front. One of those being a manager, and the other 1 or 2 taking orders outside. I usually work the drive-thru and am very quick and thorough with my position, so I often will help others if they need it. When I first started, they expected everyone up front to pitch in and help where they could no matter what, and I just assumed that was the way it was everywhere. If the manager was making drinks and I needed a food item, it was easier for me to grab the bagged food and go than it was to wait for them to be done. If a manager went on break, we were left to shoulder the burden and divide the work until they came back. It has changed over time, and often the other workers won't pitch in unless they're asked by the manager every single time. Sometimes they just expect someone else to do it. Now, I understand that not everyone is willing to do that, considering they only get paid for their position, and that's fine. I've been that person before too. I've also been the person drowning in orders and had someone offer me the smallest amount of help that changed everything. I have noticed that I am often the one to make my coworkers drinks and ice cream while also making mine, and grab their bagged items while also grabbing mine. So, while I am taking most of the orders over the headset, because they have to run in and outside, I am also stuck with most of the work. It makes my orders go out late, and I usually get behind and really need the help. It's super annoying, but I usually keep it to myself because complaining to managers or bosses goes nowhere. After years of this happening and having no support from management, not to mention all the other BS from this job, it really caused me to hate my job and caused a lot of animosity between me and my coworkers, and sometimes it's even affected how I interact with customers. My revenge is, instead of just making my own items and doing just what I need done, I will get their items for multiple orders and put them all out for them to take outside at the same time. They get frazzled and behind on orders, and take 3 times as long to take out their orders, and I get to finish mine on time, with no interruptions, and a smile on my face. 2. Some background first. I'm a soon-to-be-retired physician, which should give you an indication of my age and the relative timing of events. Back in the day, after completing 4 years of medical school, I did a 3-year stint of residency training in internal medicine, where we worked for long hours in a hospital for low pay and under high stress. This was way before the Accreditation Council for GME limited resident hours to just 80 per week. And so by long hours I mean very long hours, where we were usually on call 24 hours straight, 1 out of every 3 days, and worked 10 hours for the other 2 days except on Sundays. The worst for us was the first year of training, the internship year, where you were the low man on the totem pole and had to do all sorts of scut work that no one else wanted to do, such as admission workups, disimpacting stool, drawing blood, putting in IVs, running codes, and doing whatever the on-call senior resident, a 2nd or 3rd year resident, asked us to do. And doing this at all hours, day or night, when you were on call. The most arduous work came from trying to work up, stabilize, and document admissions from the ER late at night, called hits, especially when the admitted patient was complex, sick, or elderly. We worked in teams consisting of 2 interns and 1 senior resident, and the system was structured to distribute the most arduous work, the hits, equally throughout the night. Each team was supposed to handle, on average, the same number of hits per night. When on call, you ate when you could, used the restroom when you could, rested when you could, and slept when you could. This shared suffering in the trenches fostered a significant sense of brotherhood among our fellow interns. A side note, there were very few women in this field back in the day. For the most part, we all bent over backward to help each other out because we were all in this together. All except for one, the mushroom-sniffing pig. Dr. Mushroom-Sniffing Pig, a fellow intern, kept himself aloof from the rest of us, perhaps because he felt he was above us, or perhaps for other reasons, who is to say. More importantly, he was known to be lazy, did not often help out fellow interns when they were struggling, and somehow had easier call nights than the rest of us. This included having a lighter patient load and getting more sleep while on call. About mid-year, a senior resident found out that Dr. MSP would go to the admissions department and the ICUs and would sniff out any elective easy admissions and any potential ICU transfers, asking the non-clinical staff to admit or transfer these patients to his service. These admissions and transfers involved stable patients who required minimal clinical work, especially the transfers out of cardiac ICUs, since in those days we still admitted patients for heart catheterization, something that would now be done completely in an outpatient setting. Nevertheless, each of these admits and transfers still counted as a hit, the same as any other, and his doing this meant that more of the difficult, sick ER admissions went to the rest of us, and far fewer to him. When this was eventually discovered, he was given the nickname of the mushroom-sniffing pig. The system was changed so that he could no longer make these cushy arrangements, but he wasn't punished by the administration as he hadn't broken any official rules. However, he did break one unofficial but important rule: "Thou shalt not dump on thy fellow intern." Segue to the end of the internship year without justice having yet been served. So, with the end of the internship year fast approaching, the senior residents all got together to try to come up with some appropriate way to rectify the situation and to serve justice. One of the most daunting aspects of being on call was not so much the actual process of admitting a patient, but rather the dread of knowing that a disastrous admission was heading your way, but not knowing when. Even if you have time to eat, poop, or sleep, you eat under this cloud of dread, poop under the cloud, and sleep fitfully, if at all. And so the SRs created Dr. Tuttle, the fictitious chief resident of internal medicine at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. Late in the afternoon of Dr. MSP's last night on call, he received a call from this same Dr. Tuttle, one of the SRs who could fake a southern accent, informing him of pending patient transfer from their hospital to ours that was to be admitted to Dr. MSP's service. The fictitious patient was afflicted with AIDS, with advanced decompensated cirrhosis, and drug and alcohol withdrawal, and pneumocystitis pneumonia, who needed transfer to our facility for inpatient stabilization prior to consideration for liver transplantation, which he would not likely receive due to recent substance abuse and due to his AIDS infection, which was untreatable at that time. The patient also had multi-organ system dysfunction, including heart failure, acute and chronic kidney dysfunction, brittle diabetes, and diabetic ketoacidosis. The list goes on, and was very sick, but was not quite sick enough to require ICU care. For those in the medical field, this was all well before EMTALA law, which would have restricted such a transfer. The senior residents then got the fellows involved, doctors who were in advanced subspecialty training, and had the on-call fellow from each specialty page Dr. MSP about every 1 or 2 hours with updates on his expected time of arrival, and with additional onerous requirements for his care, including hourly blood glucose monitoring, central line replacement, hemoccult testing for blood of any stool produced, and careful monitoring of fluid inputs and outputs. As you would expect, the fictitious patient never did arrive, but sadly died in transit. But the patient's mission to balance karma and give Dr. MSP one hellish last night of internship call was accomplished. 3. This is a random story that I remember due to my partner and I reminiscing about a job we used to work together. Almost 3 years ago, I worked at a movie theater that doubled as a restaurant. Bonus points if you know the franchise I'm talking about. I was on my way out due to some accusations and drama that my partner and I were subjected to after an ex of ours who also worked there. Messy, I know, we both have learned since then. Started to make my life miserable every shift, since we both worked in the same department, just opposite schedules. I'll be referring to her as Penelope. Penelope, 24, female, was the type of person who believed that she was right no matter what, and that the bad things that happened to her were all no fault of her own. She always knew best and had the most experience, yada yada. She and I had a pretty explosive fallout of work due to everything that happened. And it ended pretty badly due to the things we both said. I tried being cordial with her at work afterwards because, in my opinion, whatever happens outside of work stays outside of work. I could hate your guts, but if we have to work together, I don't mind putting on a professional attitude and getting it done. She was not the same. She would shit-talk me right in front of me to other co-workers, would actively try to get me in trouble during peak times of the shift, and would just ignore me while I needed things or not communicating. Example, Penelope, I'm out of Tito's and I'm getting slammed with Moscow mules. Can you grab me a bottle? Yeah, sure. Stays planted where she's at and continues to watch me struggle. Every shift was a constant battle, and it grew exhausting knowing that nobody, not even the managers, would reprimand her for literally not doing her job because she was pissy with me. I'd had enough. I very publicly gave my manager my 2 weeks' notice and stated that due to the drama, I felt the franchise was no longer a fit for me. Plenty of servers and cooks were around to hear my statement. Note that I never mentioned names, just stated my opinion on why I was leaving. After I placed my 2 weeks, I noticed that things in the bar started to either be misplaced or go missing after the closing shifts she worked. I was constantly scrambling in the morning to do prep and set up the bar before the first movie, because I would spend half my opening just looking for the things I needed. When I would ask servers or other kitchen cooks if they'd seen anything, I received the cold shoulder or just a stupid smirk and a shrug. Penelope had managed to get all of them in on her stupid little antics, but I tried letting it go since I already put in my 2 weeks. My last day was the final straw for me. I came in, as usual, to start getting things going for the day, and started to set up the frozen margarita machine and shake machine. Parts were sat out as normal, but when I walked over to the margarita machine, I noticed that the inside was completely glossed over and looked slick. Confused, I ran my finger over the metal inside and immediately cringed and felt the anger rising at how sticky my hand was. The bitch didn't clean out the margarita machine at the end of the night. And the most infuriating part? Management does a walkthrough after every closing shift, so they allowed the machine just to sit in its own gunk to satisfy this stupid need for revenge against me that she had. Of course, I now had to sprint between the kitchen and the bar to quickly run sanitizer and hot water through the machine, assemble the damn thing, then pour in the margarita mix, then wait an hour for the mix to be frozen once the machine was up and running again. Through the whole process, I was getting angrier and angrier, and my co-workers could tell due to my extreme silence while working. It was steady but not too busy, and with how things were going, it looked like the closers would be getting out early due to only one of the bars being used and the other sitting idle. Basically, it was completely clean because we didn't need to use it for the slower business day. Not my closers, though, not Penelope. She was supposed to come in as I was clocking out, and I knew this. So 5 minutes before the end of my shift, I picked up all the expired wine we were supposed to toss and waste log, and poured it all on the bar, the countertop, liquor well, inside the ice bin, everywhere. 1 bottle of white and 3 reds. One co-worker started to ask me why I would do that. My glare shut him the hell up. I slammed the empty bottles into the trash, and without another word, I left the kitchen to go clock out. We passed each other on the way out, and she scoffed while rolling her eyes. I merely grinned right back and hit clock out. My grin only grew as I walked to the lockers to grab my things, and I heard the shrillest scream from the kitchen, followed by a bunch of curses and slurs about me. "Fuck you, Penelope. I hope you got to stay late and clean up all that junk. As long as you keep banging the kitchen manager, I'm sure you'll continue breezing through the job." 4. This is all from memory, based on the ramblings of a drunk retiring lawyer about 30 years ago. So I started work in the 90s on the shop floor of a pipe-making factory, but made a few friends in the office. So one year at our end-of-year breakup party, I overheard a story from the corporate lawyer who was retiring on the same day. Someone asked what his most memorable case was. This guy was gray. Gray hair, gray skin, gray clothing, gray manners. Nothing distinctive about him at all. In fact, at the annual company party, known for drinking, this guy was always sober. But not that night. He was a contracts lawyer, never tried a case, just proofed contracts all day as far as I know. He's probably dead now, along with most of the people in this story, but no company names as those entities live forever. So we made pipe, plastic pipe, water supply, sewer, electrical, and telecommunications duct. We were the second biggest in the market and would swap contracts with the biggest manufacturer as we both bid on supplying the big players in the markets. In our jurisdiction, we had a government communication department which got sold off and became Big Telco along with deregulation of the sector. We supplied green ducting for telecommunications to Big Telco, lost the contract to the competition, gained it back, etc. Life went on. One day, a new international company entered our market and started undercutting Big Telco. Let's call them OK Telco. So as things go, we lost the Big Telco contract, but picked up the OK Telco contract, which was bigger as they had to establish an entire network from scratch. Yay-us. This is where Mr. Gray enters the story. He was a contracts lawyer, not a criminal lawyer or other speciality, but contract. He gets a please attend meeting invite from Big Telco, along with a select few from our company. Probably about the upcoming renegotiating of contracts. When Mr. Gray walks into the room with his boss, there sitting across the boardroom table are Mr. Big Shit and several $5-word flesh-eating attack lawyers. Rawr. They ambush them with an injunction about using this green. You know, the standard telecommunications green, for OK Telco pipes, and are ready to take them for everything, including the pension fund, for daring to supply the competition. They had a strict contract on the table, which had to be signed then and there, or another $5-a-word flesh-eating attack lawyer, rawr, standing by at the courthouse, would have a judge sign an injunction against making any pipe at all until the case was settled. Probably an empty threat, but even a 2-week break in production could kill our company while lawyers cleared it with the judge to let us make other types of pipe. Mr. Gray looked over the contract and told the boss to sign, as they could tie us up in knots due to their huge size and budget, while the contract just made it clear that this green was the exclusive property of Big Telco, and could only make it for Big Telco. We folded like a shirt and signed. Life went on with us making OK Telco a that green pipe. A few months later, Mr. Gray went to a 20-year reunion from his law school. And guess who was there? Mr. Big Shit, telling everyone about how great a lawyer he is and how he can push anyone around due to how great he is. And definitely not due to his huge budget and army of $5-a-word flesh-eating attack lawyers. Mr. Gray is pissed. Mr. Gray bides his time and pores over the contract. A few years later, Big Telco has to have a name change due to how much bad press they have from shifty service and practices, and as a way to avoid debts under the old name. They change everything, storefronts, letterheads, everything, and they are now New Old Telco. Contracts come and go. The other big pipe company gets the contract from New Old Telco to make pipe. Mr. Gray strikes. Other pipe company and New Old Telco get served with cease and desist orders about making and using green pipe. Big Shit Lawyer is puzzled and angry that this has happened and calls Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray arranges a meeting and then hangs up on Big Shit mid-threat. He turns up with his $5 a word flesh-eating attack lawyers to see just Mr. Gray in the boardroom. No ambush, no backup, just him. Mr. Gray lets him vent his spleen about how they're going to gut the company, and Mr. Gray will never work in law again. Then Mr. Gray takes out a packet of papers and a highlighter, makes a few strokes, and pushes it to the closest $5 a word flesh-eating attack lawyer. They read what he had highlighted and screwed up their face. This was repeated as the papers were passed to the Big Shit Lawyer. I'm no lawyer, but this was about 30 years ago, so I can only paraphrase what Mr. Gray said he had highlighted. Only our Pipe Co., in conjunction with Big Telco, can make and or use this green pipe. Exclusively, with no substitutes, parent or child companies, successors or blah blah blah. Since there were only 2 companies listed on the contract, they were the only 2 sets of people who could decide the fate of this green pipe. Big Shit said they would claim ownership of the pipe colors since they were in effect just a rebranded Big Telco. Mr. Gray pointed out that admission would cause all their avoided debts to come home with interest, along with an admission of guilt in trying to pervert the course of justice. Big Shit then claimed that they inherited the ownership. Mr. Gray cut him off with the "no child company" clause. Big Shit then went on for a while, being blocked by Mr. Gray at every turn, and at the end, even his $5 a word flesh-eating attack lawyers were jumping in to shut him down because he was exposing them to risks greater than any of them were willing to be a part of, especially since they had made the contract as airtight as they could to screw us. As they were leaving, Mr. Gray said 2 things. "This was an unfair fight. All of you versus me. Next time bring more and smarter lawyers. And since we now effectively control this green, here's a document making the color public domain. We don't want to screw the other pipe company. It's not their fault they have idiots for customers." 5. I used to work for a supermarket chain, and quite often I had been asked by management to work at other locations. Most of the time, this wasn't a big deal. I was happy to help out. It gave me an excuse to drive and have the petrol paid for. However, one day I was asked to work at a location very far away at a very early hour in the morning. I initially refused on the grounds that I would have to wake up around 2 a.m. in order to have a shower, breakfast, and then drive to be on site for 5 a.m. After some arm bending from management, I finally relented and begrudgingly agreed I would do it. Due to the drive not taking nearly as long as I initially expected, I arrived on location at about 4:30 a.m. I waited in my car with the music playing. At about 8:50 a.m., I get a loud knock on the car window, nearly making me jump out of my skin. It was the manager for that store who, never seeing me before, did not know who I was. The conversation went as follows.
"You need to leave. This is private property." "Oh, but I don't care. Go, now."
Quickly realizing I can play this to my advantage, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I don't want any problems, of course. I'll go right away. Sorry." As per his request, I drove home with a smile on my face, knowing that I have the rest of the day free to myself. A few hours later, I get a phone call. I answer the unrecognized number, and I recognize the voice immediately. It was the manager who told me to leave.
Hello, I'm looking for...
Hi, yeah, that's me.
This is the manager of Go-Go Groceries from Riza. I was expecting you to work with me today. You should have been here for 5 a.m.
Yeah, I was there waiting in my car. You told me to leave, remember?
But you didn't say that...
There are no ifs or buts. I was on private property and was asked to leave. I was legally obliged to do so.
Right, but don't you think...
It doesn't matter what I thought. I was asked to leave private property. I'm not going to break the law and risk getting in trouble with the police. It was at this point he hung up on me. I expected to get in trouble for what had happened, but I never heard anything more about it. This was a few years back now, too. It's one of my favorite stories to tell. I hope you enjoyed it. I was paid for the petrol money and travel time. I was not paid for the shift. It was originally going to be my day off anyway. I suffered no financial losses whatsoever as a result of this. My local manager never spoke about this, and I never mentioned it to him. I did not suffer any disciplinary action. Yes, I did have to wake up early and lose out on sleep. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 297. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do poke that like button. And if you'd like to get the videos a little bit early, then you can support me through my Patreon, which is linked in the description. And also next to that, you'll find a link to the Hellfreezer Teespring store, where you can get yourself some awesome Hellfreezer merchandise, if I do say so myself. Yes, it is very awesome indeed. And you can also make donations during streams or videos like this one. While you don't have to do this, I appreciate it, and it helps me keep the lights on. I do so love light. It lets me see things. Although sometimes, perhaps, darkness is better. Anyway, that's how you can help the channel out if you wish to do so. And with that, I'm going to move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... Some of you out there, unlike me, lead very exciting lives. My own life is somewhat boring in the best possible way. But, and this is supplied by my lovely partner Jack, known as Linux, what is something that's happened to you that nobody would believe if you told them? Let me know, if you're comfortable sharing, of course, in a comment below. I look forward to reading all your answers. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.